What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, on this episode today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the potential upcoming next title fight at 135, that being Merab Dvalishvili, the new champion, taking on the likely contender in Umar Nurmagomedov. We're going to be talking about some odds that came out that show Umar as a minus 200 favorite and get into whether that's reasonable or if the odds makers have lost their mind a bit. We're also going to touch on a little bit of Khalil Rountree and what he needs to do as a big underdog to defeat Alex Pereira if he is to see victory at UFC 307. And of course, the upcoming main event this weekend, Benoit Saint-Denis versus Renato Moicano. We're going to break that fight down and predict it for you. But Nick, I think we should start with a little bit of news at bantamweight. You know, Merab Dvalishvili is, and always what you want if you're the potential next contender is for the champion to be saying your name.
Right.
And Merab, ever since he became a potential title challenger, he really ramped up his social media and he puts time and effort into his little skits and stuff like that. And I saw the video he put out this week, you know, kind of trolling Sean O'Malley and the little toy car saying, don't worry, I'm going to take care of Umar Nurmagomedov for you. The name that comes out of Merab's mouth most these days seems to be Umar's.
Right.
So great thing if you're Nurmagomedov, because that means you're probably going to get the next title fight. The UFC kind of wants to see that fight. Merab has conceded that if that's what the fans want, if that's what the UFC management and matchmakers want for me, that's the fight that I'm going to take. So I want to get your early thoughts specifically about what maybe Umar might have seen in the fight against Sean O'Malley and some of the strategies that Merab used to have success that he could then potentially exploit on Merab. Also want to get your thoughts on the odds that have come out that show Umar as a minus 200 favorite. You have to think that's because of the stylistic difference that Umar brings to the table and the fact that he could probably match to some degree the grappling of Merab and keep the fight on the feet potentially. So thoughts on that, and then a slight breakdown of the fight.
Yeah, well, it's a great fight. And one thing, I have a bone to pick with the odds makers. What out of Merab's performance against Suga did they see to warn him a 2-1 underdog against Umar? So I don't know. That line will probably shift a lot if that fight and when that fight gets made. But Merab looked so good out there, and I love that you brought up the fact that Umar could have learned something from Suga. On paper, they have very different styles, even in striking. It's totally different what they're good at and where they like to find their most success. Suga Sean showed us, you know, what to not do against Merab. And I think Umar, even though he's a totally different fighter than Suga and will have a totally different game plan, probably learned a few things. We know Umar loves to throw long strikes. He's good with his blitzes. He does love to get the fight to the ground ultimately, and that's where he seems to have his most success. But he's certainly not afraid of anybody when it comes to striking and standing on the feet. And he's usually got a skill advantage, unless you're talking about these guys that either came from a high level of striking sports from the past, or they've really formed like their hands and their feet in the MMA world for years and years. And while Umar's done the same thing as those guys, his wrestling is the bread and butter, just like all the guys out of Team Khabib and the Nurmagomedov staples. So I really do think that Umar probably noticed that the outside striking that Sean was attempting was not working at all. He had virtually no success in the fight in those types of exchanges. And that is somewhere that Umar is pretty good from. He really loves to be a rangy fighter on the feet, and he can kind of jump from all sorts of different stances. You'll see him in a sideways, very bladed karate stance from time to time when he wants to whip up some of those kicks and some of the more explosive type of striking. And then occasionally you'll see him get a little bit more square. I wouldn't say full Muay Thai square, but he'll get more in a boxing stance and look to utilize his feet and angles to find his target on his opponent. And I think that will wind up being more beneficial for him against Merab than the outside striking, because if Merab does anything similar to what he did against Suga when he fights Umar, he'll be so far out of range that there will be no striking taking place until they get within boxing range. And I think Umar has an advantage with both the kicks and the hands as far as striking goes, but I don't know if he has enough to keep him at that kickboxing range. I think he does have to risk it a little bit, get inside, which will lead to what everybody does want to see. I don't know if the casuals are the same as us.
Any real fan wants to see some grappling between these two.
Right. That's what I'm getting to. I think that Umar and Merab were made to fight each other and, most importantly, grapple inside of that 25 minutes. So I think you'd see a lot of fun exchanges, some grappling, some scrambles, probably both sides getting some takedowns, probably getting some takedown defense that looks pretty good as well. And early on, it seems like as close of a fight as you can make in the bantamweight division. I don't see anybody doing more before the year ends, basically, to jump Umar in line. I think Umar's pretty much set in stone to be the next guy. Merab probably didn't take hardly any damage against Suga. So I bet they try to make this fight happen before the end of this year. But if not, hopefully it happens before Ramadan starts next year, because I think Merab wants to be an active champion. I think he wants to get this thing going. And if Umar has to sit out for a couple of months next year, it would be best to get him in there competing and potentially getting the belt before that happens.
Yeah, well, at Merab's age, getting the belt in your mid-30s is something that you have to be aware of, at least when you're trying to plan out the remainder of your career,
right,
and cash in on those pay-per-view shares that he's got, because obviously leading up until now, he's never gotten any back-end money, but his next fight, he will receive some of the back end,
right,
and every fight thereafter that he's the champion. So he's going to be very mindful of the fact that, hey, I don't know how long this ride's going to last, but I need to make it as efficient as possible, and I need to defend my belt as many times as possible before we hang him up, because Merab's not one of those guys like Suga, who was already making millions of dollars outside of the octagon on his way up because of his, antics and his branding and his social media, and the products that he sold and stuff like that. So Merab very much still has all of his earning potential left in front of him,
right,
and not a whole, he is a bantamweight, so we're talking about a smaller weight class, not a whole lot of years left to really maximize those earnings. So
right,
I'm not super bullish on the end of this year just because the fight just took place, but I would like to see it. You brought up Ramadan. That's a great point because, we know that Umar will not fight during Ramadan, and then after Ramadan, he's going to need to gear up a training camp.
Right.
So probably like February, March of next year would be a great time to see that fight happen.
Yeah,
and
at the latest.
Exactly. At the latest, and then you see what shakes out, and then if Umar is the new champion, you let him go through Ramadan, and you're not looking for him to really defend again probably until that Abu Dhabi card that's, notoriously in October in most calendar years.
Right.
I like what you said about the fight being different but similar in certain ways. Umar does have very good striking, just like Sean O'Malley, but the way that they get their job done on the feet is totally different.
Right.
Here's the thing that I think Umar has an advantage with over Sean O'Malley, and that is just simply the fear or lack thereof of the takedown.
Right.
Because Sean was a bit frozen in the fight against Merab because he was being taken down so easily.
Right.
But when you're not afraid of the takedown because you have such great takedown defense, and then if you do happen to get taken down, you've got insane reversals, excellent scrambling, things of that nature, you can be a little more loose. You can be a little more free.
Right.
And I think volume is going to be necessary for Umar to have success on the feet because, as we saw against Sean, 1 to 2 strikes in a combination is not going to do it because Merab is just going to stay on the outside of that range. He's going to wait for his moments and only enter into the fire on his own terms,
right,
when he thinks that a takedown is highly likely and when he likes the look that he has and the angle that he has on his opponent. Now, Umar, he covers a lot of ground when he strikes. He as you said, he utilizes different stances, but he throws a 1-2 and uses his feet uses his feet to get him closer to his opponent as he's throwing the combination.
Right.
And if he's still on the outside of range, typically he'll follow that combo up with like a spinning roundhouse kick or a high head kick or something like that. So
right,
Umar can cover damn near half the cage with one burst or one combination. Right. So the luxury of being able to stay on the outside like Merab did with Sean, because Sean's more of a pocket fighter. You know, he feints a lot. He tries to bait you. He tries to get you to come to him, just like he did with Aljamain Sterling.
Right.
And crack. Umar's not afraid to come to you because he's not scared to give you the momentum that you need to take him down, because he's confident in his grappling. Right. So,
and their judo is a secret weapon.
Yes.
Those guys are really good at incorporating judo throws off of the other person's momentum, their takedowns, and anything like that. You notice they spend a lot of time doing those types of throws. So.
Exactly. And you know, so I see why the odds makers have put these numbers out that they've put out, and I do think the lines will change. It really, to me, just boils down to they're looking stylistically at how these guys perform inside of the cage, and Umar's style is kind of tailor-made for somebody like Merab, because Merab is not the best striker at 135.
Right.
But he probably is the best grappler. But if he's number one, then Umar's number 1A or number 1B, you know? So it's like he can compete with him on that front. So if he can make it a stand-up fight, I think Umar will have a tremendous advantage, especially if he's covering that distance. But I'm not ready to say that the champion's going to get dethroned, especially after a dominant performance like he had against O'Malley, and that fight is still a ways out. So we'll do a more formalized prediction of the fight. But I truly think that's the next fight that needs to be made. I've heard people say Deiveson's name, Deiveson Figueiredo. He's great, was a great champion at 125, has had some key wins at 135. He's looked pretty good, but I think he needs one more real signature win
against a top flight guy at 135.
Yeah, exactly. A top 3 to 5 guy at 135. If he can beat maybe a Cory Sandhagen, a Sean O'Malley, somebody like that, then okay, Deiveson Figueiredo could be after Umar versus Merab. That would not give me any pause whatsoever. But right now, I think Umar deserves the crack. And the criticism is that he's not really fought that many people in the top 5.
Right.
But it always goes back to the same thing with this camp, with Islam, with Khabib. There's a lot of fighters that don't want to fight them. Like they have long periods of inactivity, not because of injury, not just simply because opponents won't say yes to fight them.
Right.
And the UFC wants to move them up the ladder, or see if they're able to move up the ladder, see if they're good enough to take that number 1 contender spot. But it's very difficult to do that when nobody's saying yes and signing on the dotted line. So
that's why Umar had to fight Bekzat Alkaman not that long ago.
Right.
Because nobody on the roster was going to fight him. And Bekzat, even though he hadn't made his UFC debut, was like, I'll do it. It's an awful fight for me to make my UFC debut for, but hey, I'll do it. And now he's in the show.
Right. And a lot of people say, oh, that was an unranked guy, a debuter.
Yeah.
Just wait 2 years and let's see where Bekzat Almakhan is as far as his fight career. Because I bet you, just like when Conor McGregor beat Max Holloway,
great call,
it's going to be one of those things where it's like, man, we didn't realize how good that win was until we saw where the trajectory of Bekzat's career went. And Bekzat Almakhan is a damn good fighter, and he could beat a lot of top guys at 135. So
I was going to use that same analogy. So good.
Well, we're
you.
brothers,
you stole it from
so
me,
we think alike.
Yeah,
but
and I do want to touch on this one more time, because I'm not making a prediction obviously right now, and I do want to see what happens with the money line. And just to be fully upfront, I do think when this fight happens, Umar probably will be the favorite for good reason, and likely will win the fight. I'm not giving my prediction, but I'm just saying that I think when you look at it, styles make matchups, but you can't really do MMA math. It doesn't always add up. Sometimes people just have your number and you can't figure out how to get past them. But what you can look to a lot of times to find the answers, if you're trying to bet on something, or if you just want to know who you think is going to win, is you look at the statistics. And Umar Nurmagomedov is very good. He can go all the rounds and usually win unanimous decision. He usually doesn't lose a round. Merab really does rely on the judges a lot. Overwhelming pressure and just accumulation volume. He's not much of a finisher. And so that's why the odds makers might be right in the sense that Umar has more ways to win. And I don't just mean like I think he could, control the time more. I think Umar has the power to knock him out. I don't think the same thing for Merab. I don't see Merab knocking out Umar.
No.
I don't see Merab submitting Umar.
No.
I could potentially see Umar submitting Merab just because we've seen how good he is on the ground, especially in the submission realm. So I could see that. And then Umar and anybody with the last name Nurmagomedov is damn near impossible to beat when it goes to the judges. Same thing could be said for Merab, but it just makes me feel like.
So what's the path for Dvalishvili to win?
Right.
It's a very narrow path.
It's a 5-round fight with a Nurmagomedov, and that's a very difficult thing. If anybody can do it, it's Merab, but I do think that sometimes you have to look at those sorts of things, and if somebody winds up getting either a KO or submission in that fight, my money would be on Umar.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Merab wins that fight by decision if he wins it at all, but he certainly has a chance. You know, he certainly is going to come with a grappling pressure that's going to show us exactly how good Umar is. And here's the thing to remember about Umar. Yes, his last name's Nurmagomedov. Yes, he comes out of that same stable, but he got his start in striking. So he's a striker first, grappler second. Even though he's a great grappler, he's not Khabib. He's not Islam. So he can be taken down. Now, can he be held down and beaten up? That's a whole different story.
For 5 rounds.
That's yet to be determined. The likelihood of submission minimal, the likelihood of knockout minimal. But Merab could squeak out 3 rounds. You know, I could see a scenario where that would happen. And when this fight gets announced, as we said, we'll make a more formalized prediction. But I do want to make a formalized prediction now because we have a great fight coming up this weekend.
Let's do it.
Renato Moicano versus Benoit Saint-Denis, BSD. This is a great fight. I think the fans are going to be the winners after this one.
For sure.
Both of these guys like to lay it all on the line. Renato has become a big star lately. Shout out to the Show Me the Money podcast and those guys. They're doing some great stuff.
Awesome.
Renato is he's always been a good fighter, but now his personality is starting to shine through with his social media stuff that he's doing, with his podcast, with his post-fight speeches are just off the charts.
Yeah. I mean, him, Nate the Train, Conor McGregor. There's a few people that every time they fight, you want to see them win, not because you dislike the person they're fighting, but because you want to see them on that microphone.
Yeah, Derek Lewis. You don't know what they're going to say, but you know it's going to be gold. So this is a really interesting matchup to me. A couple of things stick out. Renato is a submission guy. Yeah. I do not believe he has any wins by knockout in the UFC.
Wow.
And Benoit Saint-Denis is also a submission guy. So he's got 3 wins by knockout, but certainly more heavy on the submission side, just like Moicano.
Yeah.
Now, here's where the difference lies for me. Benoit Saint-Denis averages almost 4 takedowns per fight, whereas Renato averages just over 1. So, and Benoit has never been submitted, and he has 100% takedown defense accuracy or takedown defense ability.
Yeah.
So suffice it. So basically what I'm saying is he's never been taken down.
Yeah.
100% defense. So Benoit Saint-Denis is going to be a very tough puzzle to solve for Renato.
Yeah.
Because Benoit can crack, and he's not afraid to stand in the pocket and let him fly.
Not at all.
He was beating Dustin Poirier up for that first round. If you don't believe that, just go back and watch Dustin's post-fight interview, and he said exactly that.
Right.
I was getting my ass kicked in the first round.
Right.
Thankfully, I found the shot that ended the night in the second round. But Benoit, to me, is about as difficult of a matchup for Renato as they come because of the fact that Renato, if he is to win, he really needs to get that submission.
Yep.
And how do you submit a guy that's also a grappling ace that has 100% takedown defense? That's where the difficulty lies. And I think that Benoit has the advantage on the feet. And if I'm wrong about that and Renato starts to have success on the feet, Benoit has a much higher likelihood of getting Moicano to the ground than vice versa.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the fact that this is a 5-round fight changes things for me. Because if you go back to the Dustin Poirier fight, which when you watch BSD's Dustin Poirier, it felt like we were watching the end of an era, the end of the diamond. And it was
not fun.
The first round was not fun to watch. And I love BSD, but you don't want to watch one of your heroes, one of the icons of the sport, start to go down that way. Luckily, he found that great knockout. But I do think that one thing that stuck out to me about BSD in that fight, and I can't imagine things are going to be very different in this short amount of time between fights, is he gave it everything in that first round and everything he had left in the second round until he had nothing. But he was gassed.
Yeah.
He's a big guy. He carries a lot of muscle, and he's an explosive fighter. If he smells a little bit of blood, he doesn't get shy. He goes right for the kill. And some of these guys, Dustin Poirier is hard to kill. Renato Moicano, they don't go out without a fight. So I do think that the gas tank of BSD might be something to watch out for. And since they're both submission aces, and BSD has a better takedown percentage, I would assume he would initiate the takedowns and most of the grappling that does take place. Now, whether he wins those exchanges or gets reversed and scrambles and what Moicano can do from down there is a whole nother story. And I think they're going to be pretty even Steven as far as the grappling goes once it does get to the ground. But BSD for sure will have the advantage in taking the fight there. One thing about Moicano that sticks out to me is he's tough. He's game. He does not care. And now that he knows the fans love him, they've had a couple of years now to really get used to his personality and his fighting style, and he's electric, man. The way he interviews with Joe Rogan or whoever's talking on the microphone after the fights is the same way he fights, just full energy, full bore, and he doesn't get as tired later in the fights. And I think this being a 5-round fight is a disadvantage for BSD. I think if this was 3 rounds, easy money, BSD is going to get this fight either finished in the first round or win a decision. But the fact that it's 5 rounds makes me feel like the later parts of the fight, as long as Renato can survive the early onslaught, the big storm that comes with BSD early on, then we could see some interesting things take place, some positions and some striking exchanges that maybe wouldn't unfold if both guys weren't quite as gassed. And I think Moicano's chances go up as the fight goes on. So for me, this will probably sound a little bit crazy, but I do see this fight going towards Moicano. I think he's going to end it with a submission just because I think it's going to be a war. I think they're probably going to get fight of the night. I think the fans are going to love this thing, and BSD is going to have him hurt. It's going to be one of those fights that's back and forth. Early parts are going to go to BSD, but I think somehow, some way, the fight winds up on the ground. Renato Moicano finds a Darce choke maybe in the 4th round or something like that. I know I'm going pretty specific on this, but I just see something like that happening.
Interesting. Renato Moicano will probably get taken down if Benoit wants to take the fight to the ground because
will he jump Gilly?
Yeah, who knows? We'll see. But he had it happen to him enough times to maybe give one a shot himself.
Yeah, I don't think Renato is going to jump it after seeing the success that Dustin didn't.
Oh, no, I thought you were asking if Benoit would jump it. I was saying when he's had it happen to him so many times in his last fight, he's going to probably try to reverse the roles. But I doubt it. I think that. And it's not just to say, Benoit's going to take him down and that's all she wrote. Right. Now, Renato Moicano is a legit black belt on the ground.
Freak.
He has reversals. He has great butterfly guard.
Great striking from the bottom.
Exactly. He can tear you up from the bottom. So it's not just as easy to say, if, Moicano gets taken down, Benoit's going to have the advantage. Now, Benoit is not a great guy to have on top of you when it comes to grappling. So Moicano, even as good as he is, needs to be very careful. Benoit has 9 submission wins to Renato's 10 submission wins. So they're pretty damn even when it comes to that. But I just go back to the numbers, man. And the numbers for me tell the story. Benoit Saint-Denis, 100% takedown accuracy, or takedown defense accuracy, 4 takedowns per fight on average to Moicano's 1. I think when you look at the power, Benoit certainly has more knockouts than Moicano does. And so then you start to stack, okay, let's just put 2 columns next to each other, the Moicano column and the BSD column. You're starting to put a lot of checks in the BSD box. And the one check that I will concede to you that goes to the Moicano box, I believe, is cardio. Because BSD was gassed in the fight against Dustin Poirier.
Right.
And I don't believe Moicano will be. So rounds 1 and 2 will probably go BSD's way. Rounds 4 and 5, should it get to that point, will probably go Moicano's way, which makes round 3 really important to me, actually. But I think Benoit Saint-Denis has more things and more ways that he can win, and certain skills that are going to negate things that Moicano does. I don't think he's going to be concerned overly about getting knocked out by Renato Moicano. And Renato Moicano, he's a showman now. He's going to want to go to France and put on a show.
Right.
And Benoit Saint-Denis is lights out with his striking, even though he's heavy on the submission side. Make no mistake, he can shut the lights off at any point in time. I believe that Moicano is going to maybe get a little bit overzealous and want to push the pace, want to push the action. And I like Benoit by technical knockout in this, probably round 3 or round 4.
Yeah, good call. And I was going to say, I think the 2 best options are Moicano by submission or late, or BSD by knockout early, some first through the 3rd round. And, it really is just going to determine, or it's going to be determined by who is able to implement their game plan.
Yeah.
I think BSD shown us he's a very come forward fighter, but he doesn't hop into the exchanges. Moicano will bounce around a lot and try to utilize a lot of space and create angles. BSD likes to bring pressure from forward, and he's really good at, tracking you down rather than following you. He's not going to just chase you around the octagon. He's going to try to pin you up to the wall. He's going to look for his takedowns, simplify those by utilizing the cage and keeping you from moving away from him. And I think if Moicano gets caught in that, and then he's trying to be an entertainer and lets the crowd get to him, that will be the kiss of death for him. But I think he's going to be polished up. I think he's going to do well, and it could go either way. I'm not like 100% certain in my prediction of Moicano getting this thing won, but I think he's durable enough to last about 3 or 4 rounds. I don't think the gas tank of BSD is good enough to be as good as Moicano's come round 3 or 4. And that being said, that's why I'm going with that prediction of Moicano getting his hand raised via submission, probably late rounds, championship rounds 4 or 5.
Very nice. It's going to be a good fight. And so I want to wrap up today on a fight that's upcoming that a lot of people are thinking is going to be a one-sided beatdown, and that is Khalil Rountree versus Alex Pereira.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm not even going to sit here and say that I'm not picking Pereira to win this fight, because I probably will. But I don't think enough folks in the MMA content space are really giving Khalil his due.
Right.
And talking about the ways that he can win this fight. And next week on the episode that we drop, we'll flip the roles and we'll talk about the ways that Alex can win the fight and what Alex needs to do. But today I want to talk specifically about Khalil Rountree and what specific things he needs to do in order to get his hand raised, upset Alex Pereira, and become the new UFC light heavyweight champion. And I don't think it's an unwinnable fight for him. Khalil Rountree has gone to Thailand. He's really refined his game as far as the striking is concerned.
He's changed his entire fighting style.
Changed everything about himself, changed his body, changed everything. Yeah. And so I believe that he's a live underdog in this fight. Now, it's going to be difficult because Alex Pereira throws more significant strikes per minute than Khalil Rountree does. He's got good takedown defense, but he's not going to need it because Khalil Rountree literally does not shoot takedowns ever. So, and Khalil Rountree absorbs more significant strikes per round than Pereira does. Yeah. So I think it's going to be difficult because Pereira is going to, if you look at the numbers, land more strikes per minute than Khalil. And Khalil is going to absorb more strikes per minute than Pereira is. So obviously nobody walking planet Earth can absorb a whole hell of a lot of strikes from Alex Pereira.
Right.
However, the same thing can be said for Khalil. And I think for Khalil, it's going to be controlling the pace of the fight. So I want to get your thoughts on this because you're really good about breaking these striking matchups down when you have two different types of strikers that are going to clash together. And what do you think Rountree needs to do in order to upset Alex Pereira?
Yeah, this fight is right up my alley. And Khalil is... It feels to me like he's the rightful guy. And I know it's not basically all on merit, and sometimes the rankings are a little wonky, but everybody else has something going on at the top of 205, and he's a very dangerous striker. Stylistically, it makes a lot of sense. It's going to be a fanfare for sure. People are going to love to see these two go at it because Khalil Rountree has become a full-blown meme online. You can't go a week without seeing a video of him fighting somebody with the caption says, Khalil fights you like you owe him money or something like that, right? He's a vicious striker, maybe one of the most vicious strikers in the entire UFC. And Pereira is a technician. He's so good. He's shown us time and time again that not only does he belong as a UFC champion, but he's beaten champions of old, champions of today, and will wind up fighting people who are future champions, potentially Khalil Rountree, and stopping the hype on those types of guys as well. I think Alex Pereira really needs to control the pacing of this fight. When you talk about guys who either cut to 205 pounds or they fight at the heavyweight limit, they do all kind of fight at a slower pace. You're not seeing them bounce around like the flyweights and the bantamweights. It's a very tactical, calculated fight where one shot, it could be a jab from either party, can end the night. So high risk, high reward. You have to be very cautious when you're fighting a guy like Pereira or Khalil Rountree because they literally live at about 230 pounds plus, and they cut to 205. So there's tons of power from both sides. And I believe Khalil Rountree will have a speed advantage, and he's probably going to have a kicking advantage, which sounds a little bit crazy because we've seen how good Pereira is with his kicks. He doesn't. He conceals them very well. He doesn't telegraph his kicks very much. He's very accurate with hitting the exact same spots over and over again, whether it's the calf with that quick little whip that he does, or when he does the same sort of thing but up towards your thigh. He's really good at hitting the same spot over and over and really deadening those nerves.
Or even the switch kick, as we saw against Yuri.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, I don't know if we'll see that kind of shot against Khalil because Khalil's defense is a little bit more disciplined than Yuri's. Yuri loves to fight with his hands down, and that opens headshots, whether it's from the feet or from the hands.
When you love to fight with your hands down and your opponent also happens to be Alex Pereira, then you love to get knocked out as well.
Exactly. Unfortunately, Yuri had to find that out the hard way a couple times. But yeah, I do think that this fight will be totally different. And if Khalil Rountree can go out there and implement his game plan and fight at a faster pace, make Alex Pereira move and exchange with him a little bit more rather than counter-strike with Alex Pereira, I think that will increase his chances of winning. His kicks are really good. He's really vicious once he gets in the clinch, and he does have a lot of power and explosion off of his strikes. So I know anybody can win at these types of weight classes and at this type of level. And my prediction, if we're going to go full-blown prediction on this thing, I guess next week, my prediction is probably going to stay the same. I think Pereira is going to get his hand raised. Even though he's had a much shorter career than Khalil Rountree in the UFC, he's fought way harder strength of schedule. I mean, he's fought nothing but champions for the past
couple of years,
5 or 6 fights. So Khalil Rountree, of course, has had the losses to Ion Cutelaba, and he's been back and forth in the rankings at 205 for a while. And I think the Khalil Rountree we're getting these days is the best version we've seen of him. I think he's actually peaking right now. He's a little bit older, but the heavier weight classes, they can get away with years. Yeah. So I think Khalil Rountree is probably going to be the most dangerous we've seen him yet. But Alex Pereira he's kind of his own thing. He's it's like somebody from a superhero's comic book. Like, we don't see these types of talents. We don't see these types of personalities come around often. When they come, there's just magic in the air and nothing can stop them. So it's a tall order for Khalil to win. I do think that if he's going to win, he's got to fight in multiple ranges, from kickboxing to get inside, really start to mix it up, head, body, legs, kick, and do damage everywhere to start to slow Pereira down. Make Pereira sort of get gun shy and wait for counter striking. If you can make a counter striker hesitate a little bit, you can find your openings, and it kind of freezes them up in the opportunities where they thought originally they could freeze you up. So it's going to be a big chess game. It's going to be a lot of fun. Khalil Rountree doesn't ever shoot takedowns. I don't think he's ever actually been recorded as shooting a single takedown in the UFC. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see this fight going to the ground. People are talking online that if there's a takedown, it'll be from Alex Pereira. He's saying he wants to show us some of his new MMA skills. I don't think we're going to see that happen. No. I think the best way for him to retain his belt is to go out there and knock Khalil Rountree out. It's going to be harder than a lot of people are anticipating. I do think Khalil's a live dog in this fight, just like you said. But 2 weeks can't come fast enough.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a great fight and all super solid points. I think the pacing is a massive thing because I think Alex likes to be in that cerebral, rhythmic pace that he controls.
Right. And you can find your flow state in there. Not to cut you off. Yeah. You can find your flow state in those types of moments. When it's a full-blown hurricane storm, like think about how TJ Dillashaw and Cody No Love was. Like, that was just a wild fight from start to finish. Those types of things, you can't really find the flow. You're kind of just in the chaos.
You're just fighting. Yeah.
And you're trading and everybody's having success. Alex Pereira, in some of these fights, when he's able to control the pace, he doesn't even take any damage. He barely gets hurt. That's why we're seeing 3-month turnarounds on him as a 205 world champion. Like, these are some things that are very interesting. And if he's able to control the pace, then for sure, I think he gets his hand raised.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that Khalil needs to do is try to push Alex back, because very rarely do you see a counter striker that pushes his opponent back.
Right.
Generally, the counter striker is the guy on the outside that's kind of waiting for the opponent to come in,
sniping.
But Alex is so devastating and so powerful that even when he was fighting Jamal Hill, you know, he was pushing Jamal back without even really doing anything. The famous Herb Dean wave off, you know, and then he just takes a couple of steps and boom, there's that hook. If Khalil can kind of flip that script on Alex and actually smother him and push him back, we'll see how well Alex can fight off of his back foot and how well he's cutting angles, because that's not something that he's super used to. Because he's so powerful, he generally can back guys up just by moving towards them without even necessarily throwing a whole lot of strikes. So I think smothering him, controlling the distance, and I'd like to see Khalil work some clinch. Yeah. Because I think Khalil's going to actually be the physically stronger fighter. Yeah. And I think if he can get inside on Alex and pull down on that neck and throw some nice knees up the middle, that's going to, because if you're in that boxing range or just outside of that boxing range, that left hook is just a ticking time bomb. Right. But if you can be on the outside of it and then you make your entrance, but you close the gap quickly with some good strikes, then you kind of have negated the hook, and then you've negated the switch kick, which we saw as one of his tools against Yuri Prohaska. Then it's like, okay, now I've got to fight in a phone booth with Alex or with Khalil, and he's very strong. He's got good Muay Thai, very classic Muay Thai style that he's developed over the last couple of years. And let's see if we can kind of break him in the clinch a little bit, meaning Khalil breaking Alex. So I think that's going to be the three main focal points: is control the pacing, push Alex back, and work some clinch on him and see if you can do some damage in close range. Yeah, and the clinch is very interesting because I think there will be a significant advantage for Khalil if and when this fight takes place inside the clinch. But the height difference does stick out to me. And we've seen pictures of Tyson Fury next to Alex Pereira, and people say that Tyson Fury is 6'9". I'm starting to call a little bit of BS on that. Right. But I think that Alex Pereira is every bit of 6'5". Yeah. And Khalil Rountree is a solid 6'1", 205 frame. He's built. He's built like a tank for the division. But it is a little bit harder to find success in the clinch. You can find clinch if you have a disadvantage in height, but sometimes hitting the body, you know, the hip bone is a little bit higher than where your knees used to going, and sometimes getting the full plumb or getting a tie up is a little bit more difficult on a taller opponent. I believe if he's able to find the clinch, he'll be able to find success. But Alex Pereira is very good at utilizing his range, and if he's able to basically utilize his frame to make it harder for Khalil to find success in the clinch, it may deter Khalil from attempting to get into the clinch, which is better for Alex. And all in all, this fight could go either way. I don't really see this fight going to the ground at all. I think it's going to be fought primarily at kickboxing range. We'll see a little bit of boxing and clinch range work, but for the most part, I think these guys are going to kick and punch with each other from a good range, and the best man, the heaviest hitter that night, is going to get their hand raised. Yeah, well, I'll reserve my prediction until a later video as we get a little closer to the fight, but the two things I'll predict now is that the judges won't be needed and there will be no groundwork. And probably a bonus, right? Yeah, and probably a bonus. And I think it's going to be a one-way bonus, but because somebody's going to get the knockout. Yeah, I have a feeling you might be right. Well, guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. We drop new videos every single Monday on our YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. Enjoy BSD versus Moicano this weekend, and have a wonderful week. Peace.